Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Palazzo Podcast Prospects show of the new year of 2024. And you all know me. I'm Ben Chase, Big Gentle Ben on pretty much any social media you look for me for. And joining me, we have a new member of the Palazzo team. Robbie, introduce yourself to the lovely people.
Hey Ben, I'm Robbie Baseball. You know me on Twitter at Robbie Baseball 1. You'll also know me from being on the Dingers Fantasy Baseball podcast, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. We've hiatus that bad boy, and I am here, and I am happy. I'm excited to be joining you on the prospects part of the Palazzo podcast.
All right. Well, folks, what we're going to do this year is going to be a little bit different than what we've done before on the Big Three, Next Three. You're used to two teams at a time unless we did a super big show like we did every so often. This year, we're going to do three, mainly because that allows us to get her done before the first day of the year. But it also, we're just putting away the whole idea of a prospects half hour because, frankly, I don't think Robbie or I can shut up by the time we get through a half an hour.
Just in general, can't shut up, but no way we could do it within 30 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to fire off and go through three teams, each one of these episodes. And we're also going to have some, if you're wondering, hey, where's my guest? I was looking forward to this guest or that guest for a particular system. Hold your horses. We're going to bring some guests. Also, you'll notice that this is not live. We are going to have live recordings along the way, but not all of them will be. Just because Robbie's got stuff that he's got to deal with in his life. I got stuff I got to deal with in my life. I just finally got some dogs to freaking quiet down, and I had to go blow snow today after I dropped off my kids at home. So we have lives. Believe it or not, we do actually have lives. And, most prospect gurus apparently don't if you go by their Twitter feeds and such things. So, and trust me, I don't consider myself a guru, but just saying. So let's get into, Robbie, the first system we'll tackle. I have a little bit of an affinity for. Let's just put it that way. This is my club. I've been my club since the mid 1980s when they sucked. And so I feel like I've earned the ability to wear this hat. If you notice, it's got the gold on it because it's the 2021.
Okay.
After the championship, you get the right by Major League Baseball licensing to put gold around your logo.
Yeah.
It's a real,
and then you can do something for Fridays, right? I remember Kansas City, they had like a gold jersey on Fridays.
Yes.
There was a thing. I don't know if maybe they could do it all the time and they only did it Fridays, but I remember that was like a specialty thing.
Yep. You're allowed to have a specialty jersey, which, they didn't have this year because obviously they didn't win it this year or the previous year. But we're going to talk the Brave system. Frankly, this is one of the bottom 5, for sure, bottom 10, definitely, or certainly a bottom 5 system in all of baseball. And I mean, Robbie, you got the argument with that one.
I was just gonna say, I'm gonna start. We're 4 minutes in. I'm gonna write down first disagreement at 4 minutes. No, what I will say about the Brave system is that it is full of guys that we need more pro time to really truly develop. Yeah. When we get into next three, like the three guys I've got are absolutely 800 at bats away from being legitimized. But in the meantime, we can all circle the wagons for them. But at the same time, they've got guys that should graduate from their double and triple A systems. Again, it's arm heavy with Atlanta at the top, but they could really solidify because Alex Anthopoulos, who I had the privilege of enjoying his work with the Blue Jays for several years. Now you have the privilege with the Braves. He doesn't like to sit on his hands. He likes to move bodies around, and he's been acquiring for a long time veteran pitchers to see what they've got left. It's that scene in the batting cage from Moneyball where what is it? Oh my goodness.
It was Scott Hatterberg, you mean? Or
no, it's the David Justice talking with Billy Beane.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, I want to squeeze every ounce of baseball you've got left. That's like every phone call Anthopoulos has with a veteran.
Yeah.
He's like, listen, Charlie Morton, he's talking to everybody and trying to get that guy. But at the same time, he's got a couple of SP4-5 types as prospects in the system. And as a fantasy, player, dynasty guy, you want to find those guys. It's like the Darius Vines of last year. You want to know, do they have a shot? It didn't work out with Vines, and it could this year. We can talk about that later. But you just want to know that those guys are kicking around. They're there, right? Dylan Dodd was another one who, like, I don't know how much everybody genuinely liked him 1 year ago today, but right now we're all thinking, oh yeah, I kind of thought about him. Like I thought that there was some potential fantasy relevance there, but they've got enough of those guys. They could keep punching them out while this like further back wave builds some momentum. But again, when you're winning, you're a top team and you move players, unlike the Blue Jays, who only move players in the off season. They just give up assets the rest of the year, except this off season. They're not moving anyway. Anyway, so I don't think they're a terrible system. I would say they're going to move people around, and with Anthopoulos, it's a bad idea to say he doesn't have something, because the next thing that's going to happen is he's going to go and flop and get 3 or 4 of them. So you don't want him to need to get prospects. Save that for the draft.
And this was a bottom 10 system that was still able to pull off in consecutive off seasons Matt Olson and Sean Murphy utilizing their system. I mean, legit all-star players. So, I mean, the downfall is if there's a really high-end guy, you're not going to see him in the Brave system very long. They move their boys pretty quick. We saw that last year. And let's just start off, because we're going to talk about one of those, I'm sure, in the top 3. So my big 3 for the Braves are AJ Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop, and Nacho Ignacio Alvarez. Those are my top 3.
Did you say Nacho?
Nacho is the man's nickname. Yes.
Because that's perfect. Yeah, that's excellent. I did not see Nacho. I was not looking at nicknames.
Yeah. That's a big, anyway, that's a big Braves fan thing that everybody calls him Nacho. So
okay. So I've got 2 of the 3. I've got Waldrop and AJ. Now the other guy I've got is Owen Murphy, different from you. So I got 3 arms strong, and I'm curious your thoughts on Waldrop and AJ, and then I can say a little bit on Murphy before you you do your thing.
So AJ, to me, is the high school equivalent of a Spencer Strider. Huge stuff, kind of 2-pitch dominant. And if he can control it, that's a pitcher that can come up and be really, really good in the rotation. But he has a fallback of being a really dominant reliever. And that's just it, is that 2-pitch mix gives him and 2, and you can call it a third too. But I mean, his fastball and fastball, his primary breaking pitch, are going to give him the ability to be a reliever. What the Braves have worked with him on is he's trying to do that. It goes back to Luke Jackson, that they call it just I guess I don't remember even the terming. It's the slider that they ended up teaching to a Strider, but it's this, like, it's not necessarily a sweeper. It's not a hard cut slider. It's just, it's kind of it's a bowling ball type of slider is really what it is. Like, heavy and downward bend to it. The goal is to get a heck of a lot of ground balls out of it, or swinging over the top of it. And no, I really like AJ. The biggest thing I think with him is just going to be, they moved him fast last year. And for a high school arm to go all the way up, I mean, he had never seen any upper minors action. And he ended up playing a pretty decent role in the major league club for a little while there. When injuries kind of decimated the rotation. I really like the whole entire combination that he has. His biggest thing, if that can get from he's an average to above average control command guy. If he can make that more of a plus, even an above average consistent control guy, that's a guy that absolutely can stick in your rotation. And he's right there too.
I've got the minor fear with him of they moved him quick because they thought they needed to do something within a window. Now, maybe that's like the pre-Tommy John window that, some teams have talked about where we're going to push a guy until his body tells him he can't, which seems, pretty terrible. But that was my fear with him initially. And at the same time, he was 7th round in 2021. So nobody was like, oh, this is the guy. It was one of those, who the hell is this guy? So now we're all playing catch up on the skills that were there, as you already mentioned, Ben. So I'm pretty interested in what we're going to see Atlanta do with him. Like, are they going to keep him up? Yeah. We've seen like the battles with Soroka, Ian Anderson, right? Like they come up, they're looking good, they're looking elite, and then an injury or something has changed with their arm, and now we're not seeing the same guy. So maybe they were like, well, we've got him now. Let's push him, like we did Strider. Let's get them up. Let's see what they can do. And I think the next guy up is Hurston Waldrop. I think that's the next guy that they're going to push. He was drafted and finished the year in AAA, like same season.
That's incredible.
I don't know what you're honestly wanting from a guy out of that, but like he transferred from Florida for this past year, was on a great team. Atlanta takes him later in the first round, 3-pitch mix. Everybody's saying, I don't know if he's, an ace, but I don't care. An SP4-5 that gets an opportunity has room to develop. And if he's going to do it, he's 21 right now. If he's going to do it in AAA, I'm all for it. In first-year player drafts, he's a top 15 pick for me for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I'm resting on that guy and expecting some end of 2024 value. Because I think even if it's 4 starts, they're going to be in September. Like, if he's only getting a bit of time, I don't think he's coming up in May and going back down. Like, I think this is somebody that's going to get 15, 20 starts at AAA. They'll make a decision on, and it could be like, he could be a steal in first-year player drafts after everybody goes nuts for, especially if you include the international guys in your first-year player draft, he'll easily fall back into the teens. Well, he could fall back into the 20s. Yeah. I would be picking him mid-teens myself.
To me right now, Waldrop, if you're looking, we'll get into more overall rankings and things as we get farther into the, in our team-centered ones. But if you're looking at pitchers, I mean, Yamamoto is an obvious, and then because in your first-year player draft, and then Skeens. And to me, that's it. That's it.
Absolutely.
That's all that I'm drafting ahead of him. Because even if he comes up and he's just, let's use the example of if he is Spencer Strider in 2021 when Strider first came up. Strider worked out of the bullpen, but man, did he rack up stats. He was a really good asset in September out of the bullpen for that team. That's something you want.
Like once upon a time, David Price did that. I believe Sale also started out of the pen. Like there are guys who have done it who are special. There are other guys who have just done it, but there are guys who have done it and been special. And then when you are the GM or, the manager and you're given that kind of a prospect where it's like, here's a guy we love, but we don't need him to start. So put him in where you want to the skipper. I think you can get good things out of him. So it's a really good one too, right? Like you're like, here are 2 guys that should pitch on your rotation this year if you want them. Like, and those are your 2 prospects in a crappy system. That's a good start to a crappy system. That's just it.
But, to me, and here's my comparison. We're going to talk about him later, but Waldrop to me feels a lot like Cade Horton felt coming into last year.
Oh, okay.
Coming out of the draft, he had not had a lot of pitching experience, so there's a lot of questions as to what he could be, what he would be. Yeah, he showed good in the short time he had on the mound, but lo and behold, the concerns about his control were really tampered down once he got in a pro development system that worked with him on that. And all of a sudden, the guys, you could make a good argument that Cade Horton is the top pitching prospect in baseball right now. So we'll get to him more.
So talk a little bit about Nacho, because I didn't put him on my list.
Yep.
And then I know you can add on to my Murphy.
So Alvarez is one of those guys. The Braves have done really well in junior colleges. I just wrote up a thing for IBWAA on Andrelton Simmons and his retirement. And nobody thought Andrelton Simmons was worth the pick that the Braves spent on him back in the year that they did. They've done very well with junior college type players. And Alvarez was one of those. He's a guy who he gets the zone. And that's what, to me, there's a very, very high floor there in a system that has very few hitting high floors. He's got a very high floor simply because of his eye. Now, there's a body that he can develop into. He's got some natural raw strength that he's really not put into gameplay yet. I think it might be a 15-20 home run bat. I don't know that there's 30 ever there, but big arm defensively that I think he could. I don't think he's a shortstop long term, but put him at third, that might work really well, or plug him into a corner outfield. And I just think he's such a high floor guy because of his eye that he's going to contribute. And that's frankly, there's a lack of bats that you can look at and go, that guy's going to eventually contribute in some way at the major league level within this system.
Perfect. Because I know that they didn't like Vaughn Grissom enough to trade him for old man Sale. And I was hoping that Seattle could have pulled that off with Kelenic, but I know that had a lot more salary implication stuff to it. But disappointment for disappointment. You want to hear the Braves have some, middle of the field bats worthy that could be coming along. And like you said, like if he can be kicked to a corner outfield spot, I like to use the joke that, Juan Soto would be really useful if he wasn't your left fielder in Dynasty. And if you're in an auction league, wasn't costing you a quarter of your team's salary, like he's a great player, but at what cost? You want those guys in the middle.
Yeah.
And we're never going to talk about catchers, or at least I'm not going to, but when we do accidentally, you would love to have one that's useful, very much like you want your left fielder to not cost you a ton and be useful. So my other of the top three, Owen Murphy, the 19-year-old Braves first round pick in 2022. This is what I wrote on him. I'd like him to be a two-way player because he was good enough to do it. And my quotes are, where were the Angels on this one? Let Ohtani go and then put up the Owen Murphy banners. Anyway, in Atlanta, he's just been pitching and he's been doing it well. He's a 6'1" righty, which is not exciting. High school guy, again, not exciting. And then the stats go low and lower and lower as you're like a high schooler and you're under 6'3", and all these things that mean you're going to suck. And he's thwarted them all away. He's got the right mix of K with a low enough whip. He's on the stat sheet looking okay, but the ERA makes him look ugly. So people in Dynasty are not like, this is an ace. But we know Atlanta's going to give him a shot because they're going to move guys up. And think of this. I mean, Ben, you know this, but for the listener, Sean Newcomb had more chances than Jose Reyes did. And that's just with the Braves. Reyes had to go to all MLB teams to get opportunities, but Sean Newcomb was able to do it in Atlanta, and a lot of the same guys are still there. So I think it's going to happen where Murphy is going to be given opportunities, and if it doesn't kick the first time, we're going to see him come back, right? Ian Anderson is another guy who they're trying hard to make it work with. Soroka, same deal, right? Owen, and they're all much older, but Owen Murphy is a young guy who, finished last year, I think, in A-ball. He's going to get an opportunity. They've got a lot of money invested in him, and he's part of their next wave. But he is at the top, to me, he's top three guy, just because I love the potential of him to be a stable minor league developing player, not the Waldrop and Schuster up and moving guys. This is going to be that slow, steady guy who, some prospect guys are going to get tired of because he's, to everybody, he's not moving fast enough. But to me, a high school guy who moves a level a year is doing it right.
Yep. And he's one of those guys who doesn't jump off the page simply because he doesn't do the things that we all look for now. Right. But if you talk to any scout out there, they tell you Owen Murphy's fastball is a plus fastball. It runs in at 90 to 93. But it's a plus fastball because of what he can do with it. And these are the type of things I was hearing on Mike Soroka when Soroka was in the minors. That this kid just knows how to put a little more pressure on the index finger or the middle finger, or how to, short arm something just right to give it a little bit different spin, little bit different look than he did the last time he went through the lineup And so someone's looking for a fastball, sitting on a fastball, and they get a fastball that does something just a little different, and they pop it up, or they ground it out, or they foul it off, and then he gets them with a breaking ball the next time through. He's a really smart pitcher on the mound.
And I think a lot of that goes back to the fact that he's also been a very good high-level hitter. So to him, like there's an Ohtani doc that I think ESPN did. I randomly watched it on Disney before all the off-season stuff and really respected the guy beforehand. But watching it, it talked about how he's the only person at the MLB level, if we're going to count Lorenzen as the second potentially guy, who understands what's happening in the batter's box when you're throwing as the pitcher, like truly understands, because he would want to be able to get himself out. So his backup, I'm sure, is instinctive. Like, what can I not hit? Or what do I struggle to make contact with? Yeah. And when because a lot of the times pitchers just aren't on. They don't, if you're an athlete, you have an off day, you know what I'm talking about. You just don't have your A game stuff. An Owen Murphy having good B level games is going to be the difference between, SP 4.5 and an SP 2, 1.2, even if you want to go that high with it. And I feel like Murphy's got the ability with that knowledge of hitting at this exact moment in time to continue to develop and be that SP 1.2 type, more of the two than, we're not seeing crazy anything, as you mentioned, Ben. But I really believe in that part of his game.
And, he reminds me a lot, or I use this guy a lot, but you don't need to be an elite velocity guy to be an ace. Look at Brad Radke. Brad Radke was the ace of that Minnesota team that had Yohan Santana. Game 1, the ball went in Brad Radke's hands. Yohan was the best pitcher in the league at the time, but Radke was the guy they knew they gave the ball to. He was going 6, sometimes 7, and he was never going to put an extra guy on the base paths. He almost never walked anyone. He was just one of those consistent strike throwing guys that, really, the joke was if you didn't get to Radke in the first inning and knock him out, he was going to go 8 on you. And that was not terribly wrong because he's just that type of guy. And Murphy has that kind of like command and control and just that smarts, that level of smarts on the mound. I could see him being that kind of guy. So
there's a second guy for any of the Canadians out here who you'll know. I got the bobblehead right here, Marco Estrada. He was not intimidating until you were standing in the batter's box. And for some reason, his peak was relatively short, 3-4 years. But again, we're stretching out a youngster and projecting here. And for fantasy purposes, he's taken, and I don't think you're going to be able to acquire him without it being a relatively big deal anyway. But I would reach for him. So anyway, so those are 4 that we feel are the next big 3 because our math is just like that here at Palazzo. What do you got for the next?
So my next, I had Owen Murphy in there. And then I have 2 other guys I kind of put in there. I have 3 pitchers total. And I think they're 3 very different type of pitchers. In that, I could see Spencer Schwellenbach, as he gets healthy this year, being very, very similar to a guy like Strider or things like that, where they push the 2-pitch thing and really push him forward. He's a hell of an athlete. Talk about the hitter and pitcher stuff. This is a guy who was a legit hitter in the Big Ten Conference. And, an actual prospect as a shortstop coming out of college. I don't like what I've seen, and I hear good things on his changeup, but to me, his breaking balls can blend a little bit. So you're really talking about a guy with a plus fastball and 2 breaking balls that can kind of look the same. That, to me, screams reliever. And with his injury, he's coming off Tommy John. He's had some other injury stuff this year. So that's one guy to me. I could see him being pushed fast as a reliever, or if they want to let him develop as a starter, he might sit down in the minors a little bit this year, longer than what people think. He might be sitting in Double-A all year long, even if he has a lot of success. And people are going to go, what the heck? College guy from 2 years ago, back from Tommy John, why aren't we pushing this guy up, to Triple-A? And there's if they're wanting him to start, that's going to be why. The other guy I put in there, we're probably not going to see much in 24, and that's J.R. Ritchie. Had Tommy John this last year. God, I loved what I saw of him before he went down. He's just he's a guy on the mound who has that, 93 mile an hour fastball, but he can touch 98, but he likes to sit down lower with it. And it's not it's not that high rise fastball that everybody loves right now. It's just, but he can locate the crap out of it. And then he has a couple really, really good breaking balls. He can spin his slider in two different ways, which is how he gets his two breaking balls. But man, the control is just pretty. And, another high school guy that the Braves got last year, and, in that same draft as Owen Murphy. And just, it's a bummer that you didn't get to see him this year really push forward before the Tommy John came on. But I think if you're looking at dynasty stuff, he's going to slip a lot because of that.
Right. The lack of a stat line just hurts.
Yeah.
You haven't done anything wrong, but you haven't done anything. And therefore, there's a whole new draft class that's going to come in and make your valuable guy less valuable. Max Meyer, when we get to Miami, my God, the dynasty outlook on him is insane 1.5 years later from what it was. But anyway, yeah. So Richie, same thing, could be suffering. Not that he was up, MLB ready, but at a lower level. And again, don't ever sleep on these guys, because as long as the team's not getting, or the player's not getting rushed by the team, there's like a good transparent plan between those two, the development staff and the player. And as a dynasty guy, you just got to know it's working, right? Like if they sit out for 2 years, sure, worry a little bit. Something else might be going on. And if you hear thoracic, you run. But otherwise, you run. So my other three Atlanta guys, I'll rhyme all three off, and I'll just look for your eye reaction to see how well I've done. Mario Baez, 16.4-year-old J2 guy last year out of the DSL, 311 average, plenty extra base hits. He's coming to the States this year for sure. I wouldn't wait to get him. I'd go for it now. 5'9", 175 pounds. So he's a tube, but it's thin at the moment. So we'll see if it gets thick or if it stays. This is going to be a big jump year for him, right? If he falls flat on his face, we're all going to forget about him. But I don't think he's going to, because when I see good OBP from the Dominican League, I believe in that. I've scouted a lot, not personally went there and scouted and knocked on the doors and spoken to the families, but from a distance, I've scouted these guys, and I like to try to find swings on them and see how they play defense. And of course, everyone's a shortstop. But to see, is this more realistically a second baseman? Probably. But that's okay, because he's patient. And if he can be patient when he comes over stateside this year, and if he can go from complex league into maybe low A by end of season, depends on what the plan is. He's so damn young that I'm excited by him. Douglas Glaude, I'm saying that right? Is it Glaude? Yeah. What a terrible last name. Just change the name. DG's got to be the nickname. He's a J2 2022 guy, 19 years old now. He played in both rookie and Florida last year. Again, I'm just going to go back to this a lot. Great OBP in rookie ball. Extra base hits were there. Lack of home runs, and the low average make him look like a guy you don't care about. But I'm watching, and in my deep leagues, 50 minor league spot leagues, I'm looking to get him, because why the heck not? When you understand patience at a young age, I take that over power. Personally, Isaiah Drake's the other guy, 18-year-old. He was a 5th-round pick last year's draft. He stayed in complex league. We didn't get to see the at-bats, but it's the scouting report. Ben, would love to have your thoughts on him. 6', 180 center fielder. Sounds about right. You'd love 6'3", but let's just assume that's going to mean he doesn't smash into the wall, because he's got good balance and the skill set looks like it's there.
And in all seriousness, if you look at the Braves system and what they've developed well recently, you see very few 6'3s. You see look at Ozzie Albies. And in fact, you brought up Baez. Baez and Albies, to me, have a lot of similarities. Baez could control the zone very well as a young player and was a beast on the base pass. But here's what's funny. Already, Baez has more professional home runs than Albies did until he got to Double-A.
Oh, wow. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
And now Albies is like a guy who can hit 30, which is whatever. Right. But you're talking about someone or a system that has done well developing that smaller stature guy, getting them the max out really in their bodies. and then producing the most. I mean, Drake's the tallest of the guys you mentioned here at 6 foot, and he's not exactly big, but good Lord, does he have tools. I mean, he might be the fastest guy in their system, just in pure home to first time. And, he's also a guy that folks are throwing 50 to 55s on his power. If you got that kind of power plus speed, the only thing right now is folks are he's got a goofy bit of a swing. And I like when he settles into his swing, especially when he gets into his back foot and then leads from there, he's just really, really good. And the swing looks good. Like, I don't know a good way to describe it. It's when he gets on that back foot and goes from there, he's got a consistent swing through the zone that's going to get a whole lot of line drives, pound the gaps, and then he can just blaze with his speed. The issue is he ends up drifting a lot to his center of gravity. And when he does that, he gets a bit long in the swing, and frankly, he makes a lot of weak contact to the opposite side because he tends to be behind in his body, and so he gets it opposite field, but it's on the ground. And right now he's beating out a lot of those because frankly, when you're a double plus runner in complex league, you hit the ball to shortstop, you got a good chance of getting on base because frankly, they're going to screw up their.
I was just going to say, there's a lot of guys who are working either at a new position or their teams told them to sit back or do something that's out of their natural element at that level. So BABIP is pretty important. You want to look at BABIP at the really low levels. And then, of course, you look at stolen bases if you think the BABIP looks insane. And if they're also stealing bases, then sure, circle the guy, but also put a couple asterisks. You need to see next level, right? You need to see better. That doesn't have to be better pitching. It needs to be better defense on the field. Can they still get those ground ball hits? Are they not able to do that anymore? And are they still stealing bases, or are the catchers a little better, or whoever in that league, right? Sometimes you can run into a couple elite catchers who really hold a couple guys back, or a real crappy coach who doesn't want to see them running because they want to see them work on something else at the very low levels. So it's skill set heavy with those guys. So anyway, that was 32 and a half minutes in, and we've just finished 7-ish, 8-ish Braves. Let's just assume we'll take emotion out of it. Do you hate the Diamondbacks by chance, or do you love them?
No, here's what I'll say. Coming into last year, this was a system that you probably could have ranked as a top 10 system without a whole lot of argument. They graduated a lot of guys, including the National League Rookie of the Year. I mean, so let's be honest. They utilized their guys well. You and I talked before we started recording about Brandon Pfaadt. There's another guy that they graduated that, maybe didn't look so great during the regular season, but holy crap, they don't get to the World Series without him.
Right.
And, they utilized, they used up a lot of rookie time on guys like Drew Jameson, Tommy Henry, these pitchers that maybe didn't come out and light the world on fire in 2023, but they were productive. They 8 innings for a team that was desperate for someone to eat innings because of all the injuries that they had in the rotation.
And the Mad Bomb cut, he was supposed to be, 5.5 innings, every time or whatever, 5.1 innings every outing. And it was so off. And it was, I'm assuming, such a clubhouse cancer that they were willing to walk away and eat that money. And I also think, Ben, that's why we saw more rookies instead of veterans signing or a trade for a $5-6 million guy who wasn't pitching well, because they just didn't want to put the money in because they were paying Mad Bomb. And kudos to the Diamondbacks for not only overcoming that and being a successful team, but doing it in the NL West. The Dodgers are trying to crush you. You got to go play in Coors. Not that that's that's difficult. But then you also have San Diego trying to put a chart. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to do it.
And guys like Geraldo Perdomo and Alec. Why did I just lose his last name? Thomas. There we go. I was like, common last name. Alec Thomas and Geraldo Perdomo. Both of them last year, I think, were graduated from rookie status, but you're also talking about guys who not yet have a full year. And
Yes.
so this system drastically changed. But here's the deal. We look at it right now, what it's going to look like next offseason is going to be drastically different because they have 4 of, I believe, the top 40 picks this coming July. They're going to restock this system in a dang hurry come July. It is ridiculous how many draft picks they have early. It might be 4 of the top 50, but it's something like that.
Now, do you think, because I watched what the Mariners did this year, where they also had that, like you just said, the 4th pick, the rookie of the year pick, and they were kind of interesting. Now, Dipoto, I think he's one of the most brilliant GMs. Dipoto's my guy. He makes moves that I always follow the path of, like what's going on, moving good and bad contracts all over the place, because he's working within the confines of the budget that he's been given. But he got a lot of high school guys, I think, the last 2 years in the draft class. And the one thing they have struggled to do with consistency is provide themselves with homegrown infielders. It's also easier to do the outfield. You got 3 positions to go to, right? But you can fail as a shortstop and end up as a second baseman. But realistically, they haven't been able to do it. Now, they've made good trades. JP Crawford has stabilized himself as a major league player, but they spent money on Suarez that didn't work out over time. Teoscar Hernandez trade last year. They've been moving guys. JP France was a great deal. Like that trade of peak Austin Nola to San Diego came back and helped them out quite a bit. But at the same time, Dipoto hasn't been bringing guys up. Cal Raleigh might be the only homegrown infielder.
Yeah.
And they're not looking for him. They're looking for him to get 500 at bats this year, but I'm pretty sure they only want him to, catch 55% of the time. And that's why they gave money to Garver, right? Was to have the 2 guys. So there's a lot. And anyway, I'm off topic with that, but it's intelligent moves when you have the draft picks available. And I'm interested to see what Arizona's going to do. Now I'm back on top.
And that's what they did so well in 2019. That 2019 draft where they had like 8 of the top 80 is how they built the system. That was including Carroll. That was including, there's a ton of guys, Blake Walston is one of those guys that came out of that draft. They used, I think there were 2 draft picks that they've used to acquire people.
I was going to say they traded one of the starters that they traded went to Pittsburgh, or maybe it was 2 that went to Pittsburgh. And those were the guys that I had drafted in most of my fantasy league. And now I can't even remember the name. And as
Malone,
you can tell, they're probably not on my roster.
Yeah.
Brennan
Malone.
Malone, that was one. Yeah. And Malone, I was like, that's the guy. And you know what? That wasn't the guy. But if you don't take those chances when they bundle it up, KC did it once with a bunch of college pitchers. Yeah. And I mean, it hasn't really worked out for them, but I was excited at the time at the fact that they did like a themed draft. So it'd be great to see Arizona do some kind of a theme draft too. But anyway, top 3.
Yeah. So I don't know. And you might disagree with me. I think most people have pretty much the same top 3 with very different ideas about one of the players. But I have Jordan Lawler, I have Drew Jones, and I have Tommy Troy in my top 3.
I have Yumin Lin, and I have him as my number 2. And I love me some Yumin Lin, which is probably why he's there. So the Lawler, do we really need to get into it? Like Lawler's an MLBer, right?
Yeah.
If you don't know, just go look for a major league shortstop that I'm assuming is going to struggle. And this is the note that I had on because I didn't want to actually like put in anything about stats because this is more exciting to me. Tell me if you like this, Ben, and I might do it again. He's an MLBer that might be a slow burn potential bust guy. And I would tell whoever in your dynasty leagues exactly that, and that in 3 years, he may or may not get it right. He could just become Kelnick. See if that rattles the cage of the dynasty owner in the league that has him. Try to trade for him because he's got all category potential. Doesn't matter your format. He could be elite. And like when he, like in the 2021 year draft, I had all very good teams the year before. So I didn't get to draft him high. Yes, I'm bragging. But I would absolutely look to go back and get him now. Like I would wait till May, and some dink in your league is going to be panicking if he's hitting 190 or something like that. Yeah. Because again, he's seen pitchers for the first time in his career. So this is that the pitchers will be ahead of the hitters, pitching ahead of the batting. In this particular circumstance, that's what I'm feeling with a 21, 22-year-old. So I would look to acquire him 100% because it's worth it. But I also understand that there's a time you can wait to get him at his lowest. Right now is not that time. Not that time. But he's the best guy. So I'm curious your thoughts on Jones, though. I'd love to know what you think, because I don't get why people were disappointed, but they were.
And I will say that I just put out a top 250 for Rotoballer recently and dinked Jones a bunch because I had watched some tape, and then I got more tape. The rest of that tape was the end of the season, and Jones is going to be moving back up that list again.
Okay.
Jones finished the year when he got back up into full season ball with a 3-4-5 line. A 300, 400, 500 plus on all of them. What else do you want offensively? I mean, the swing still has some work to do. The instincts I think so much of the issue with Drew Jones is dad. And people saw his dad come up to the major leagues at 19 years old, read balls, hit into the outfield like nobody has in our lifetimes in the outfield, and so they went, hey, he's the son of Andrew, so he's going to just be an instinctual center fielder, of course, and he's going to hit bombs because, Andrew once hit 50, so he's got that kind of potential, I'm sure. And you know what? Kids aren't necessarily their dads, and that's sometimes those kids need an extra year or 2 or 3 to get their feet under them. I didn't see anything that told me there's not power there, that there's not speed there, that he's not an elite fielder. Everything I watched already was great. Then I watched him come back, and when he came back up late in the season, he really cut down on his swing. He simplified it a ton. And honestly, he was getting more power out of it. I don't know that, I guess I would have to look to see where the home run numbers ended up. I couldn't tell you, but it just looks like a better swing. He looks comfortable in it, and he generated his hips better through the swing. So, I mean, you're going to get that natural power. But this is still a guy that has potentially double plus speed, he's a great fielder, and he has a huge arm in the outfield. Like, what else do you want?
So I think it's just like a flooding of the systems of people being like, well, he didn't do what we wanted, but he got drafted and then got hurt. And your body has to not only naturally recover, but you're an athlete and you're young and you've never faced the competition you're now facing. And people were disappointed. But his end of year, like you nailed it though, Ben. You said 3-4-5 line, end of year line, 252, 366, 718 OPS. I'm cool with that for a friggin' 19-year-old who finished the year in A-ball. He played less than half a season total and was probably probably trying to find the right Bitcoin financier to put all those bonus baby dollars. And not to mention, he's living, like you just mentioned so well, in the shadow of a legend in his father. So there are ways, there are Blue Jay players that their fathers are also legends.
Your club knows that.
Well, I don't want to be directly associated as a Blue Jay fan per se. That triggers me. But what I will say is that I switched to become a Mariners fan because of the just mentioned Jerry DiPoto. I really liked how he did it, and I decided Ross Atkins just isn't my guy. And if it's major league managers that make us happy, there's like general managers, there's something wrong with the people above them making the choices that are allowing them to then move the cards around. So anyway, Drew Jones, I'm all over him. I'm with him now. My bid on Yumin Lin is pretty easy, and then I'd like to hear on yours. Make sure I got the right. Yeah, the notes are short. Right. He's short. He's 5'11", 160, but he's a lefty. And he's 20 years old, pitched in AA. So you don't need to get too deep on this. Like, he didn't pitch full season there, but he went there and he survived. He did not thrive in it, but he still had a really good K-9 for the year and promising things. But again, like you mentioned, Arizona pushed a bunch of guys up. I think that's why he went. It was like performance related, but also they need players to pitch in AA and AAA when guys get promoted. I think he'll end this year in AAA, and then he might just sit there and wait, or he might get hyped right up. And because he's so young, if he's 21 in AAA, everybody's going to know who he is. So I tried scooping him up a lot last offseason. Many other people beat me to it in some other leagues, and I was pretty pissed because I didn't think he was deserving of being taken, but I also play in some pretty intense dynasty leagues where guys are doing the same amount of work I am, and they don't have a podcast. So, credit to those Yumin Lin owners out there, or guys who roster him. And if you don't, look in your league right now. If you're on Fantrax, it's Min-Lin if you can't find them. I know some sites are really anal on the perfect spelling. They don't do the like generically speaking, and then they give you a bunch of lists of potential players. So anyway, who is your third guy of the top three, or the big three? Sorry,
Tommy Troy. And to me, Tommy Troy looks like if you would take everything Jordan Lawler does and knock it down a quarter, as a musician here, you take something down a quarter note, or a half step. That's pretty much what you do with Tommy Troy. I don't know if Tommy Troy is a shortstop. I don't know if Jordan Lawler is. I think Jordan Lawler's got a better chance to be a shortstop than Tommy Troy does. I think Troy is going to be that type of guy that if he makes, let's say 75%, 80% of what he projects out to be, you're talking about a guy that's a 20-10 guy with good feel for hitting. And if he sticks at third instead of short, that plays in fantasy all day long. It may not be Jose Ramirez. It may not be your starting third baseman, but guy, playing that guy is going to allow you to go get Juan Soto. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to allow you to get that expensive guy at another position that helps you do something else in categories, because he's going to fill in a little bit in all those categories.
Well, and he can improve at the MLB level. Like, he could be the Orlando Arcia, right? Or Arcia is going to, I think, play this year at 27. Maybe it'll be 28. But he's young. Yeah. But people just assume he's, 34. Very much like Jose Iglesias spent so much time disappointing Red Sox fans that the rest of MLB forgot he was still young, because all they were told was that he wasn't good enough. But he hit consistently for a long period of time. But it was always as a disappointment. He was supposed to be so much more. Allegedly, like his career was fine fantasy wise. Like, I rostered him for several years in different leagues at a cheap cost, like you said, because people just didn't fully appreciate it. He didn't have that massive year that everybody, piled on all these expectations. And maybe that's going to be the same thing for Troy. It's just going to be, he's on a team that's flush with talent. He won't be the guy, so he can be a guy, and a very useful one for fantasy.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So my next three, what do you got?
Okay. So my next, I've got Lynn in there. And one thing I want to say with him, just because you mentioned him, and we already we broke him down pretty well at this point, but you talked about potentially jumping on a guy early in the season with Lawler. Lynn could be that guy on the minor league side, because he's going to be playing all of his year in AA, AAA, two of the worst parks in the minor leagues to pitch in. And he works with a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. I'm not saying he's going to fail. What I'm saying is his ERA is likely going to be 4 something. And there are going to be people who are ready to just jump away because he's posting a 4 something ERA, and all of the extra stuff is going to be the same. All of the metrics are going to look the same. He's just pitching in 2 really crappy parks, and suddenly everyone's going to jump away from it. That might be the guy to grab at that point. Go out in May and potentially grab him as he's posting a 4 something ERA coming off a 6 earned run in 4 innings type of game.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I don't, but I do. I like that for acquiring him. I definitely I appreciate that analysis.
Like I said, I don't think he's that guy long term, but I think he's going to have some games like that this year just because of where he's at, which doesn't reflect on him. Just like the Tulsa rotation last year. Tulsa's park is built to have rotations like that. You're going to have elite rotation. Now, granted, there's a hell of a lot of talent the Dodgers put at that rotation, but There's a reason why they had like 5 guys with a 2-something ERA at one point. It was ridiculous. Anyway, so my other guys, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I have Ivan Melendez is one of the other ones I mentioned.
Okay. Yep.
And then I'm going to mention 2, mainly because I really believe in Yancel Luis, I believe is how you say the name.
Okay.
But the other one I want to make sure we mention is Christian Robinson.
Yeah. Okay. He could get his own episode. We could do the Christian Robinson.
That's just,
like he's lived a life already.
And some of it, well, a lot of it, not so great.
No.
But folks need to take a look at his final season numbers last year. He got himself up to AA. Everyone says, well, yeah, but he was 23. He hadn't played played any baseball for 4 years. I mean, 2019 was the last time he recorded a single professional at bat. And he comes out and he works his way up to AA. And over the entire year, / 283, 382, 532. Yeah, there was swing and miss. But you also have to realize, once again, this is a guy who hasn't seen live pitching in that long. And he put up that slash with 14 homers and 23 steals.
And have you mentioned his backstory at all on the podcast before?
I think we talked about it last year just because we were wondering when he was going to get on, or get back. Because
just to let everybody know, like, this guy was out of baseball, as you mentioned, but he's had, like, depression issues. There were some legal things he couldn't get over here, I'm in Canada. He couldn't get over to your lovely country, Ben, because of those issues, because of the legal issues. And he went through it. Like, he went through it to get back because he wants this. And now, like you said, he got his way up to AA. Of course, it's not going to be complete, right? His body has changed so much since then. I believe he lost a dramatic amount of weight and then also had to go through conditioning programs just to be able to, like, prove to Arizona he's back. He's medicated now. He's going to live a normal kind of stable life. So props to Robinson for doing all that he has for himself. And I really hope to see him in a jersey. Like, I don't think you just give someone something because they tried hard. I think they actually have to be talented and successful. Well, he is talented. I hope he gets to be successful in that. And for dynasty guys out there, like, if you've had him, you couldn't get rid of him for 2-3 years. So if you still have rostered him through that, you're probably not willing to give him up. And if you're thinking of trying to pick him up for nothing, I don't think whoever has him is going to do that. But a reasonable offer for a guy who could have a spot in the outfield, it's not a bad move to make, to go about looking to acquire him. But obviously you're not giving up something you truly believe in. Like, he's not necessarily a dart throw, but he's not someone who you're going to circle as like, this is part of my 2025 team. He could be, coming back to what he once potentially was going to be. Yeah. And that's cool. Yep.
So the guy, we mentioned Melendez, but the other guy I want to chat just a little bit about is Yancel Luis. And like I said, I'm not 100% sure I'm pronouncing that right, but he's a switch hitter. Came over stateside this year, and he's one of those guys where everything is at least average. And, just has those skills all across the board. You watch him on defense, he's got a lot of instinctual stuff that helps him play up too, to where he's got an average arm. But God, he blows guys away when he gets the ball because he takes the right steps. He's got himself in perfect position to make that throw every time. The arm might mean he ends up at second base, but he spent the whole year at 18, put up some really nice numbers. If you look overall, I was just going to pull up the overall stat line here. 269, 335, 441. Not holy crap type of numbers, but, all across the board. 7 home runs in 62 games, 16 steals. It's just, he's a guy who has all the stuff you'd like. Who he reminds me of a lot is someone that they got rid of this last year in Ryan Bliss. In that he could stick it short, but he's probably best at second and just does a lot of things very, very well.
Okay. Yeah, I've got 3 completely different guys, but that's because
All right.
that's because Lynn was in my top 3. But I've got
Yep.
Christopher Torrin, an 18-year-old
Oh,
shortstop.
yep.
I've got
Yep.
Kevin Sim, a first base, outfield, maybe second base, maybe third base. I don't know if he can catch, maybe he can pitch. 21-year-old, 5th round pick in last year's draft. And I've got Ricardo Yan, a 21-year-old SP who was a J2 guy from the 21 class, which at 21 in a J2 in 2021 makes him an old guy for the J2. So on Christopher Torrin, 5'10", 155. We're not big fans of that. He might want to have a meal or 2 more a day. Killed it in rookie ball with a 320, 434, 864 line, and went to A, where he had just turned 18, by the way, if that happened, and did not finish strong, which is good. So let's just go ahead and throw the rest of the season out there. Probably got to eat 3 meals a day for the first time as a pro. Things changed is what I'm getting at. So I'm going to look at him like I did Aaron Judge. He'll get a promotion and he'll struggle. I'm not saying he's going to be Aaron Judge. I'm saying look at him like that. Judge came up to a new level, struggled by end of season, stayed at the level for the next year, caught it and learned it, and then succeeded. Let's just bank on Torrin doing that next year, going back to A-ball. Look at the first, 30, 40 games. Did he catch on? And I think he's going to. And I think you might want to pick him up like a Dogecoin, because I'd like to go back to Bitcoin references just because nobody cares about that anymore, because you can pick that up cheap. Okay, on to Sim. Kevin Sim, his story's cool, which I didn't actually know this part of it. So Kevin Sim's name is actually Zhang Hun. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I work with a guy whose name is Steven, but then I learned that his given name is very similar to Young Hoon. It is Hunja. Very fun. So anyway, son of a Korean legend hitter, Sim will be a slow hype prospect. I've written this, that's why I'm speaking like a moron, but likely to debut in 2025 if he starts back in A and gets a midseason promotion to AA, because as you mentioned, there's going to be movement in this system, so there will be opportunities. He can play everywhere, but at 6'2", 210, middle infield is going to be out. That's a big body to be moving around, but the scouting report is promising. And again, this is a 5th round pick who could be 2025 MLB ready. And then Ricardo Yan, he's much shorter report on that. Massive K-9 with a good whip, like we talked about with Arizona. You're just going to ignore ERA. You're looking at a few raw skills here, and then the stat line you're going to focus on is just going to be Ks and whip. Because if he's screwing around with guys on base, if he's issuing a million walks, he's not going to be good long term. But this guy seems to be locking it in. So those are my next big 3. And I think we could see them getting hyped a little bit earlier. Maybe not hyped, but getting focused on a little bit earlier because of the movement and all the graduation that they're going to have. So let's move on to they're not the most hated team in baseball, but a lot of people don't like them. And that's the Cubs, because some people love them. But I wanted to start off the Cubs with this. Remember Matt Mervis? Oh, that was so fun. Okay, now let's talk about Cubs prospects.
I was a huge driver on that train last year. And what I will say is everything you heard about him was really good on a personality level, as in like he was one of those hard worker, gonna max out his skills. And
he's a grinder, baby, a baseball grinder.
What you're hearing is the Cubs sent him down and said, you need to work on this in order to maximize your ability at the major league level. Because if you look at him, if he would learn to ignore the ball that comes in chest level and up, heck, maybe even just under chest level and up, the guy would be, and just focus on crushing what else there is.
Yeah.
He would be great. And there are a lot of players that do that. And they hit 250. But they hit 250, they get on base at a 400 clip, and they mash the crap out of balls. He just needed to make that adjustment. Yeah, pitchers are going to get you at the top of the zone, but they got a small margin of error to work with. Ignore the top of the zone. They have to be perfect to get that. Focus here, and you're going to kill it, and he won't make that change. And I also feel like
the Cubs kind of set the table for Mervis to take first base last year, right? Like they brought in old what's his nuts, old man. I can picture his ugly bearded face from formerly of the Royal, Eric Hosmer. They brought in Eric. I like how evil I was on him. I don't know what he did to me.
Yeah.
But they brought in Hosmer on a 1-year deal. You know, the potential of Bellinger moving to first base for, you know, all that crap that happened, right? But they basically were like, this is your position to earn. You're not being given it. But initially in the offseason, it was like, Mervis is going to be the first baseman opening day. You know, yay. Remember when Pete Alonso did it? Yeah, they're two very different players. But Mervis came up and struggled. And I think it was probably because he heard for 4 or 5 months solid, he was going to be the first baseman for the Cubbies. And every time he lifted weights or did whatever he did, he's like, I'm the first baseman. And then he hit that roadblock of no, we've got professional hitters here. And then it was, earn it back. So it'll be interesting to see, but I just wanted to bring him up because he's a perfect example of prospect hype that didn't have the previous pedigree where we were like waiting for it to happen. He wasn't JP Crawford who came up and struggled. It was like Matt Mervis off-season, hero, and then in-season disappointment. So, and there are guys within the Cubs who have already been up and down prospect ladders across the board. I've got one of them in my top 3. So, but I want to hear yours.
This is a system that I've heard 2 different podcasts that I like to listen to on prospect stuff already mentioned the Cubs as their number 2 farm system, which that says a lot. I mean, this is not just a talented system up top, but it's really deep with guys that could, if nothing else, be a solid major leaguer. Just for reference, Pipeline hasn't updated their rankings, and I'm sure this is going to change some, probably for the worse for him. Matt Mervis is listed as their number 13 prospect right now.
Yeah. It's funny how quickly that's everybody turning their back on him, right? That's like the podcast that only talk about the top 150 players in baseball and the top 8 prospects. And then when one of the guys, Zach Veens, we talked about him before. Once one of those guys shows I'm not, a superstar at this exact moment. And then they're like, I don't even know who that is anymore. It's like some girl you got the number to, and then you're like, you know what? I don't think she was that pretty. And then you never talk to her again. That's where Matt Mervis is right now.
Wow.
Yeah, he has been shunned, but he's been shunned by dynasty baseball because he didn't kill it last year. And I'm not saying that he should have. He was given the opportunity, and everybody got pumped up because we want first baseman. We are starving for first baseman. And it's waved into that for us, right? Like you mentioned Melendez with Arizona, man, we want him to hit, we want him to take off. There's oh my goodness, who's the other guy that it doesn't matter. I'll save him for when we talk about the team, but there are teams you want to succeed. I don't have any infielders. I've got pitchers and 2 outfielders with the Cubs. That's all I've got for them. So.
Well, then I'm going to give you a fun one to start with because one of my top 3 is actually an infielder. I have Pete Crow Armstrong, which I think pretty universal number 1, and Kate Horton, probably your pretty universal number 2.
Absolutely.
Here. I have Matt Shaw as their number 3.
Oh, okay.
I really, really like Matt Shaw. And now this could be my Big Ten bias coming out to some degree, which I'm perfectly fine with admitting. But Shaw's just, I don't know where he ends up on the field, but the kid's going to hit. He's one of those guys, he hits. He hits, and he's got, as, a recovering Blue Jays fan, you remember Kevin
That's
Smith.
The right way to describe me. Do I remember Kevin Smith? I still have dynasty shares. I cut him a week ago in a dynasty league.
Yeah. I mean, when he first came on the scene as I'm using him because of the Maryland background, but the power speed combination,
love it.
Tool is completely different. Yeah, but the power speed that Kevin Smith had, but he can hit 280. That's a hell of a player. And I mean, I think that's really what I think they're probably very similar defenders, which that doesn't say a lot for poor Matt because Kevin was never really a great defender. But if they can find a spot to put that bat, the Cubs are going to have a guy that's got a really fun profile for fantasy owners.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. So Kevin Smith, you made me do it, Ben. You made me do it. In 2021, he had 21 dingers, shout out, and 18 stolen bases. Prior to that, that was his dip year, was 2019, because he went up to Double-A. So he had
Mhm.
25 dingers and 29 stolen bases in 18. But last year, so he came up. I don't remember if he started the season with Oakland or came up early on, whatever
No.
it was. He came up and sucked as an MLBer. Third time he'd come up and sucked as an MLBer. Went back down to AAA, was very good. Finished the year with 16 home runs, 9 stolen bases, 324 average. And Oakland was like, never mind. So
Yeah.
I'm terrified when you say, you know who Matt Shaw reminds me of? It's Kevin Smith. And I'm like, oh, dear Lord, no. But they're not all going to turn out like that. Now, Kevin Smith, I don't know if he signed back with Oakland or not, but I think he's going to be one of those guys who needs to go, and this is the problem. He needs to go to an Oakland where they don't have a set guy at shortstop, third base. But like you said, he's not an excellent defender. So he needs to be in a position, and I think he may have even played a bit of first last year. He needs to be in a spot where they're just going to let him play. And I feel like sometimes these types of guys who, as you said, you don't know where Shaw's going to go, if they don't have a position or at least the knowledge that they're going to get 15 at bats this week, they can struggle because that means they're going to practice hard because they think that's where they're going to get most of their action. And I feel like you get that tunnel vision, like if you're in the batter's box and a hitting machine just keeps throwing them to you, you just get into that rhythm, which baseball is not rhythm at all. And every pitcher is going to throw you off that doesn't throw like the batting machine does. Because you can time them out to throw every 15, 20 seconds, whatever. But if the timing is off on that, you could see struggles. Now, again, I haven't scouted Shaw to say this or that, but because you've upset me so much by mentioning Kevin Smith, I don't like Matt Shaw.
Oh, my goodness. So what if I would tell you Kevin Smith would only strike out 70 times in a year instead of 125?
Oh my gosh. I think
honestly, that was a big thing.
Absolutely. Well, he was the not really 3 true outcome type guy, right? Like where it's like if he gets on the base path, he's gonna, if this thing happens, these other 3 things are gonna happen, right? If he strikes out less, if he learns to take, more. I mean, his OBP I think was okay, but last year just hitting so well in AAA was very upsetting because Oakland didn't really want to win, but they also weren't willing to give him, 30 games at third base to do it. And they had somebody else in Oakland too, who they kind of did the same thing. I can't remember his name at the moment, where I thought they were going to give him time. Actually, there were 2 guys in Durham or was it Durham? No, wherever, Nashville, who I thought they were going to give time to. Dalton was the other, Kelly Dalton, something like that. It was like a guy that was with Tampa Bay for several years. He was in Durham, played very well, went to Oakland. I was like, oh, this is going to be his time, and then Oakland didn't even give him an at bat. So it gets a little wonky sometimes with those crappy teams. But again, Matt Shaw, total bust. You heard it here first.
There you go.
Okay. So my only other of the big 3 is 23/24-year-old Alexander Canario, who I've got. And if I am not mistaken, he had, was it double shoulder surgery last offseason? Yeah, was he the accident?
I can't remember if it was on field or what.
It was off field, but it was too okay. I wanted to make sure it was the right guy because I had him in one dynasty league where I traded both him and Kevin Alcantara, also with the Cubs. And I forget, I got back pitching of some sort in this league. It was like an 8x8 league.
Broken left ankle and
it was left ankle,
left shoulder.
There we go. Okay, and I remember being like, well, now neither can you set your foot. Or can you turn and do it with power? Okay, I'm going to trade you. And he was amazing. Hell of a recovery from the double surgery. I kind of now see a Teoscar Hernandez slow build with him. Like Teoscar was not a great Astro, but the Astro, very much like Canario, Teoscar was on a loaded Astros team that needed to move players. And if Canario's not a fit with the Cubs, not that you want to see guys move, but the move could be very positive for him if it means he's going to get at bats somewhere else. If someone's going to let him hit, I want to be, rostering him for when that hot streak comes. Like, I don't think he is a Juan Yepes type, burn, like, we're all excited and then we're not, like not to the Matt Mervis hype, but I think Canario could be of use. And that's why I've got him as he's my number 2. Actually, I've got PCA as a 3 because he was a Met and that stink might still be on him.
So Canario bugged the crap out of me last year because I owned him in a deep league, and he got up to the majors
Yeah, very exciting.
And then they never used him. He
I know.
sat there. I was just, because that's a league where you play anyone who is actually up in the majors because
Right.
it's going to help your team. And he just sat there and did nothing. He was up for, I think he was up for 3 weeks and he played 6 games. 6. What the hell?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jake Alou had that a bit with Washington too.
Yeah.
And he was somebody who people were thinking, hey, this is a guy who could have an everyday role, almost from the start of the year, but they slow rolled him. I just had to make sure. I'm like, it was Alou, right? Yeah, it was Alou with Washington, who had that off-season potential that everybody liked to give him and didn't get it because when he did get called up, he was in a platoon role. So with Canario, I think they were trying to give him opportunities to do well, like Nelson Velasquez, right? Like the Cubs had Velasquez up and then everybody got, all excited about it. But I think Canario's, I think he's going to be an MLBer for sure. It's just a matter of what team or what lineup, what manager is going to make it really click for him. And I don't know if it's going to be with the Cubs. So next 3, mine are all pitchers. Who do you have?
Okay. Mine, I have the guy who I actually thought you were going to say, Owen Casey, Moises Ballesteros, and then just because I want to talk about him a little bit, James Triantos.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. All right. I've got Jackson Ferris, a left-handed pitcher, 6'4", 195, 20-year-old. Brody McCullough, which I might be pronouncing it wrong because it's MCCULLOUGH. So I'm going with McCullough.
That's how I would probably say that. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. And then Porter Hodge, 22-year-old guy. So my Hodge love just comes from the fact that he was a 13th round pick. He's 6'4" righty. He had really good, the 80 innings pitched, AA last year, 103 Ks, ugly ERA. There's hidden value, outside the stat line, of course. McCullough, same deal, 6'4" righty, 86 in the 3rd innings, 108 Ks. He finished in high A. He's got to go back and really dominate. I think he needs to move quick or he's going to move to the pen. But I kind of look at him to go back to Atlanta as a Darius Vines type where there is no real value for him, but there's potential for him to become valuable in fantasy. So if you play in deep leagues, sometimes they do 4 or 5 relief pitcher spots. Maybe that's his value, but at the moment he's starting. So I'm treating him as a starter. And I like the idea of a 6'4" righty getting opportunities more than I do a 5'10", righty or lefty really. And within the Cubs, it seems valuable. And to me, Ferris is the real one. This is a kind of ace in waiting type guy. I think he was a 2nd round pick last year. Yeah. 2nd round, 2022. Yeah. Sorry, I said last year. I guess that's technically 2 years ago. So he was the high schooler. And usually when this happens with the Horton, the college high school guy, you get the high school guy and try to get him under slot, and then you get the college guy safely. But they were able to get Ferris, I think, under slot. But anyway, he's pitching well. And in 2 years, maybe they give him a little push if they think they're doing well. I quite like Ferris. And again, as a 2nd round pick in dynasty leagues, no one's going to give him up to you. But if you come with a fair offer, somebody who's kind of like a list type guy, Ferris could be. This is very much like a Kobe Mayo situation where you knew from the draft he could be good. He started out doing okay, but he didn't all of a sudden get tagged as a superstar. Ferris could be very valuable in fantasy.
Kind of guy. Yep.
Yeah.
So on Hodge, I was just pulling it up because I thought I was right in thinking this. They moved him to the bullpen last year, and I really didn't like it because at the time he was, last year the Southern League had that goofy tacked ball, and some pitchers like Ben Brown, one of his teammates, just went nuts with it, did really, really well. Porter was not one of those guys. Porter could not control the freaking ball. It was like he didn't know what to do with that new ball. And instead, right about the time that they switched back to a regular ball, they pulled him out of the rotation. And I'm like, God, I wanted to see what he could do now that they're back to a regular ball. Because, you taught hype guys last year in the Cubs system. Porter Hodge was sneaking into a lot of top 10s at the back of a top 10 last year coming into the spring. And I'm in a league with some guys from BA and from BP and different things. And Hodge was like a 4th round pick in our redraft. So guys that weren't owned yet. there was a lot of people who thought he, and as soon as he came off the board, you could just see everyone go, "Oh, I thought he was already owned. Oh man!"
Wow.
So yeah, I was surprised at how much folks loved him last year. I still think it's an unfortunate name for a guy who one of his biggest knocks as a draft pick was he's a little chubby. So to call him, the fact that his name is Porter and his knock was that he was chubby is not really a great combination, but being a fellow chubby guy. But that's, I get it, but I like the stuff. I like Porter a lot. And I had bought in pretty well last year and kind of had that blown up in my face. So Ballesteros is going to be a guy that you're not going to like because he's a catcher right now.
Yeah, I don't want to hear it, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm on the podcast. May as well tell me about him.
But I think he's going to. He reminds me a ton of a guy that we're going to talk about next 3 and 3 podcast in Samuel Basallo with Baltimore. He's just a tick below Basallo in both hitting skills, but in power and in hit tool. And I don't know if he's ever going to play catcher in the major leagues, but he's got the kind of bat that could work as like a 6 foot tall first baseman, which I don't know if he's even 6 foot, but he kind of reminds me of body wise of Williams Astudillo.
He's 5'7". You got an Alejandro Kirk on your hands, my friend.
Oh yeah. No, he's short. He's, like I said, you look at him, like I said, the turtle for a reason, with Astudillo. And
I'm watching a little video at the moment. Oh yeah,
he's got
he looks
nice
old.
pure swing. Yeah, he looks older
for
than
a 20-year-old. He looks like he's in his mid 30s.
Yeah,
and his kids are waiting in the car.
So the one who I would jump on is, and it's funny, neither one of us brought up Kevin Alcantara, which if there's a tooled out guy in that system, there's one. But Owen Casey,
prospect
very
fatigue, I'll go with
very similar. Owen Casey with Canario as far as their total skill set, big arm guy. If you wanted to put together what you want out of a right fielder, it's usually plus power, plus arm. Well, that's what both of those guys have. Casey's probably the better athlete overall, but it's all a matter of just making contact. That's really the biggest issue with both of them is they got to make consistent contact. Casey did it last year, but I don't know if that's necessarily long-term he also struck out 164 times and 439 at bats, so there's a lot of swing and miss to that game, but man, does he have a fun defensive profile.
And the Cubs we could have picked 9 guys,
and that's just it. Either, yeah.
Like they're deep, and like I said about Houston in the Teoscar comparison, they're going to be a team who's got to make moves because they don't want to just lose the value, right? Like minor league free agent idea of you don't want guys to leave. And the Oakland guy, the Tampa guy that went to Oakland and then didn't get a shot, I believe was Dalton Kelly was his name, and now I think he's 29. So he kind of lost that window. He could be a PJ Higgins type where we might see him for 200 at bats, and everybody gets real excited. But I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I think that time left. But anyway, okay, well that's 3 teams down, and you even were able to squeeze in a bit of catcher talk. So
there we go. And you tolerated it, no less. That's
I did, yeah. I went on mute and screamed for a minute, but
I didn't talk about Triantos.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Well, it's on me. I didn't bring him up, but this is a guy. He was a big time hype guy in the 2021 draft. And I ended up going in the second round to the Cubs that year. Came out and just hit like a madman in Complex after the draft. And so I was in a lot of first-year player drafts where he went. And people just thought this guy is going to be the next thing. Well, then the next year he comes out. He did still hit 270 in A-ball, but he just did it with nothing. There wasn't much walk behind. He wasn't getting on base. There wasn't a lot of power. So what is he going to be? Well, I think we've kind of seen now, yeah, he's not going to be a guy that gives you much for power. He just isn't. But he's got a really good eye at the plate. He can play a lot of places defensively. As a fantasy asset, I mean, let's just say really maximizing out, you're talking about an Omar Infante type of guy who can play a little bit of shortstop, probably is better at second and third, but could play all three. Wouldn't surprise me if he got to a team. God, if he was a Tampa Bay Ray, we would all love it because of what he do. Because they would be able to utilize that skill set. And
well,
frankly,
I mean, they gave up on Xavier Edwards. You know, they do occasionally give up on guys, but yes, generally speaking, I agree.
But I mean, just it's and frankly, the Cubs did it before too. But now they have Swanson and Horner at second and short, and probably for a long while. And so you're probably not going to see anybody pop up and play, 130 games playing second, third, and short for the Cubs anytime soon. I mean, Javier Baez did that right away.
They genuinely need to get themselves a first and third baseman, because you don't want Nick Madrigal, who should be your second baseman, hitting at the top of your order for contact, at the bottom of your order playing third base, providing you with no power. Like, it's going the wrong way for Madrigal quick in his pro career. And like, I have been a big fan of his since draft day, thinking that this was going to be a huge contact guy. And it's as if the two spots he's landed in, they were both like, no. What we'd like you to do, you know how you play small ball? Play even smaller ball, and we're not going to give you opportunities. Of course, he got hurt, which affected him. And then he was in the trade to move over with the Cubs, which looked like a perfect spot until the Swanson signing. And then it was like, well, now trade Madrigal, but they didn't. And I'm assuming that's because there was nothing out there for him. So a third base, Patrick Wisdom's not your first, third option. He's getting worse by the year, as much as you want. Like, I mean, I think they threw him out to left field also last year. The Cubs moved Wisdom around because he was the only real power bat through the season. I mean, you had Bellinger, yes, but like, your guy who you're expecting to hit 25 dingers from, he was the guy. And
I mean, it tells you how bad their system is right now at those positions, that they sent Chris Morel down to winter ball and said, figure out how to play first base.
It's like, can you sort this out, please?
So, I mean, Triantos could play a very good third base. He's got a strong arm, but he's going to be a guy that's going to hit you 280, 350, 350. He's not going to get you much at all for power, which is going to bug you. I mean, frankly, his ideal stat line is going to be what we get out of Cabron Hayes at third base. And he's nowhere near that defensively. I mean, he's not going to be that elite defensively. That's why Cabron Hayes still can play third base, is because he's so stinking good at third base defensively that they'll take whatever they get from him offensively.
Which is like one of the rare times that occurs with that position, because you got to have one substantial offensive skill at that point. And for some reason, I mean, Pittsburgh also does have a lot of guys. When we get to them, that'll be a fun conversation of if you get to play and move those pieces around, play pretend manager. How do you set that lineup? Because there are a lot of guys there who are not well known, or the guys who were drafted high who have moved up, and then now everyone's disappointed with them. So, but well, the Cubs are fun. Atlanta, all too well, and Arizona, I think, is going to be an interesting system for a couple years here. So it was a good first three to start with. Yeah.
And I think, the way I looked at what we've got set up the rest of the way, we're going to have at least one really freaking good system every single time out. One pretty crappy system every time out. And one kind of in the middle of the road. It kind of lines up perfectly. And I just did this alphabetically, folks. So it lined up really well. But like next time we get together, it's going to be Baltimore, it's going to be the White Sox, and it's going to be Colorado. And you're talking about probably the top system in all of baseball.
This is the Rockies you're talking? Yeah, okay, continue.
Yeah. And then the White Sox, who are, frankly,
they're fun.
They sold off in order to get to the top of the bottom 10 systems in baseball.
Yeah.
Like, man, if they didn't have that return sitting in their system, hey, and then Colorado, who, boy, talent-wise, that's a fun system. I don't know what I think about what to expect out of that talent, but it's a fun system to talk about. So we're going to have fun next week. And
Absolutely.
I think it lines up like that all the way as we go through the board. So it's going to be a fun time going through these with you, Robbie.
Absolutely. And we'll have it done before opening day, and everyone will be lined up and ready. And we didn't mention it before, but if you want the inside scoop, if you want to pick Ben's ear or mine or anybody else on the 6-man Palazzo rotation, join that Patreon, because we are obligated to talk to you.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's the way. If you've got a draft coming up and you want to know about team X or player X or a trade or any of that stuff, that's where you'll find us for sure. The Twitter is optional. The Patreon, that's the way.
The Patreon, the Discord, those are the two spots to find us all. And we're gonna, like this today, I brought out, I knew of Luis from Arizona before. Somebody else brought him up and said, could you please talk about it? Cool. We can make sure that fits into the system. So we're going to probably workshop some of this stuff before we record, just so you guys can know. So pay attention.
Absolutely. And if you listen this long, you'll love it. So
we love there you go. Absolutely. If you can put up with our ugly mugs for this long, you're doing all right. So, all right. Well, I think that's going to oh, good Lord, if I trip over my words.
Nailed it. You nailed the wrap up.
Absolutely. I don't know if I can wrap
2, 1, action.
That will give us a great look at 3 systems to start things. Come back and join us for more this offseason, because Robbie and I are just getting started. So we're going to get better at feeding off of each other. And during the live ones, you guys are going to have, I know you guys will have great prospects that probably the two of us have heard of, maybe. So
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
That's the fun part of doing these live, but it's also good to just be able to record some of these whenever it works in our lives too. So we'll look forward to doing more of these throughout the off season. And for now, we'll sign off, and we'll talk with you guys again next week.